So it's been a while. I initially intended to deliver fleet statuses every month. However, bad things occurred. But I've decided that it'll be what it's going to be. So let's run through the months and see what's taken place. 5 month summary. Let's go. And no, we're not including June and July because they were way too hectic. I'm going to need a separate video for that. Late December 2024. This was around the time that my last fleet status was created. 5991 at Stengel got the local scheme. 1534, 4570, and 7458 were loaned to College Point. 9 next gens were ready to be shifted out of Eastchester scrap for scrapping in Long Island. The last old gen hybrid in existence, 3525, a former Basie Park unit, was sent to Eastchester scrap on December 31st, along with 4119, a former Basie Park next gen, which was at Zariga for a while. It also came to our attention that retired Flatbush RTS 5050 had been preserved in upstate New York. A few temporary express bus loans were shifted around Staten Island. Last time we left off, in terms of New York City Transit Next Gens, Manhattanville had 14, Stengel had 32, Fresh Pond had 6, East New York had 6, Flatbush had 11, Eastchester had 7, which were now retired, sidelined on December 19th, and 4247 and 4485 have been retired, with 4487 awaiting retirement in the depot, which actually left 4 next gens at Eastchester awaiting their fate. 4486, 4488, 4506, and 4588. Basie Park had 7 next gens left. JFK had 14 next gens left. LaGuardia had 35 lithium next gens left, with 4498 actually being retired. At Zariga, 4551 and 4589 were now present, while 4097, 4105, and 4365 were sent from Zariga to Eastchester scrap. At the time, they had 9 next gens or more, which were listed here. Kingsbridge had 4 XE40s, Michael J. Quill had 22, and Grand had 24. And here were the Conehead assignments, just to get everyone on the same page. Alright, January 2025. West Farms received several loans, ranging from LFSAs to next gens, and even XDE40s and LFS hybrids. At least 7 units listed here were loaned to West Farms on January 14th. Kingsbridge had received a few XDE40s and LFS HEVs as loans for rush hour trippers. LFSAs 5339, 5835, and 5898 were loaned to Quill. By the end of January, Michael J. Quill had 2 2017 XD60s still on loan from Hale. XE60 4952 returned to Quill from Kingsbridge on January 15, 2025, after being sent to the JFK vendor twice. This officially marked the end of the XE60 era for Kingsbridge. For now, Tuskegee got next-gen loans from Manhattanville as they usually do. Hale used a few loans from Quill on the M7, XE40s 4993 and 5000, and XD40s 7596 and 7614. XD60 6077 also went to the depot as a day loan on January 17th. At Stengel, next gens 4093, 4355, 4378, 4571, 4580, 87, 98, and 4601 were received. That bumped them up from 32 to 40 units. 7766 and 8761 were loaned to the depot between January 17th and 27th. MCI 2299 did a trip on the Sim 35, which was pretty cool. The last 2019 LFS at Castleton, 8714, was out of service from October 7th to January 7th, pretty much for 3 months. It re-entered service on January 7th, 2025, ran on the S78 school tripper and the S46, then was transferred out of Castleton to Jamaica the next day, replaced by Jamaica's last 8900 series Conehead, 8937, on January 8th. Its first trip on Staten Island took place on the S48 on January 9th the next day. Now Castleton has 23 Coneheads, and Jamaica has 23 2019 LFSs and 41 Coneheads. Jamaica has 8694 to 8718 without 8708-09 due to accidents and fires. So this is the way things were from around January to June. However, in July and August, these 2019 LFSs would find their way back to Staten Island, with some of them going to Charleston. The first trip 8714 did at Jamaica was on the Q77 on January 16th. It was one of 3 ITA LFSs to be fixed up, 8702-03 and 8714. East New York got 4452 from Fresh Pond, along with 4394, 4397, 4417, and 4541 from LaGuardia. 4473, which was retired on December 23, 2024 due to an accident, was sent to Eastchester scrap. 4200 got into an accident on January 2nd, but was able to be fixed and run for a couple more months. The depot at this point had 11 NextGens listed here. Now regarding Fresh Pond, NextGen 4187 briefly visited Fresh Pond on January 22nd to conduct a run on the B7. Ironically, that will be the last time a NextGen actually ran on a Fresh Pond route, at least until June 9th, when 4478 ran on the B54 and 4541 ran on the B52, East New York loans to Fresh Pond. Somewhat similar case to what happened with the old gens at Manhattanville, where some Hale old gens were among the last to run on Manhattanville routes. Out of the last 6 remaining NextGens, Fresh Pond retired 4047, sent 4093, 4355, and 4378 to Casey Stengel, sent 4452 to East New York, and by January 14th that left Fresh Pond with 1 NextGen in service, 4104. 4104 was thought to be retired on December 27th, until it was revealed to have been doing operator training as of December 30th. For a second time, it was believed to have been retired on January 19th, then said to have been reactivated on January 21st. Finally, it was declared to be officially retired on February 1st. Therefore, on that day, we were able to officially mark the end of an era of the Fresh Pond NextGens, from 2011 to 2025. 4104's last trip took place on an early morning run on January 16th on the B20. East New York and Flatbush NextGen eras have outlasted Fresh Pond somehow. It's crazy how East New York, a depot that ended their NextGen era way before Fresh Pond did, ended up keeping NextGens around much longer than Fresh Pond. Also crazy how Fresh Pond has gotten a ton of NextGens from MTA Bus, and now they have none. Just goes to show you how quickly things can change within this agency. Now 4047 and 4355 were excluded from Fresh Pond in the days leading up to this, between January 14th and the 17th. And we also had some permanent moves like 7092 from East New York to Fresh Pond, and 7133 to Fresh Pond as well. Ulmer Park used C40LFs 460 and 481 as loans on January 6th, then loaned out 2012 XD60s 4748 and 4784 to Gleason on January 29th. 120 Ulmer Park buses were held out of service on January 30th due to poor condition. As for the XE40s, 4970, 5020, and 5024 had arrived at the JFK vendor. 4986 was returned to Kingsbridge on January 8th. 5002 ran on the M11 on January 9th, fulfilling a new trip brought by congestion pricing. 4968 was delivered to Quill, while 4970, 5023-24, and 5030 were delivered to Grant. 5030's delivery was special, marking the first 2025 XE40 to be delivered to MTA property for a 187 XE40 order between 5030 to 5216. This order will be coming with an option order of 193 XE40s, and then will be followed by a 265 XE40 order. Meanwhile, 5024's delivery marked the numerically highest XE40 unit in the 60 XE40 order to arrive. 5024 entered service on January 23rd on the B60, while 5030 entered service on February 13th on the B62. 5012, the unit which Grant had received in May of 2024, entered service on January 21st, 2025. So now, Quill had 23 XE40s and Grant had 28. Meanwhile, XE40s continue to test at East New York and Charleston, paying both depots occasional visits. 4981 conducted some training on January 21st on the S74, took a trip to the JFK vendor and Grant for maintenance between January 21st and 24th, then towards Staten Island on January 29th. XE40 4981 entered service on January 29th on the S78 and S55 out of Charleston, marking the first Excelsior to run on Staten Island in years, as well as the first electric. We also had these interesting trips to Jamaica and East New York take place, because East New York now had Chargers at this point. At Eastchester, MCI D4500CL 3458 was given to them from College Point, 3422 was later retired as well. Meanwhile, Zariga's 2007 MCI D4500CL, 4306, and X-Charleston unit, which hadn't been in service since May of 2021, was used to transport parts to LaGuardia on January 3rd. It was then transferred to Eastchester Depot on January 26th, given an MTA bus tracker on the 29th, and re-entered service on the BXM-10 and BXM-7 on February 5th. This was a historic development, since it was the first time that a 4300 series MCI has been in service since November 3rd, 2022, and the first time that one has seen service at Eastchester. It is quite reminiscent to 2926's time at Eastchester. This single occurrence opened up the door for MCI and Prevost transfers from New York City Transit to MTA Bus, namely Eastchester Depot, which would take place through July and early August. 2025 Prevost 1630 was transferred from College Point to Eastchester on January 15th, with its first run out of Eastchester occurring on January 17th on the BXM-10, where it remained until February 21st, when it was ultimately sent back to the South Plainfield Prevost facility. Its last run out of Eastchester was conducted on February 19th on the BXM-7. Trade war disputes may have made this order difficult to deliver for a few months. Thanks a lot, Schittler. Keep in mind, Prevost did shift to Canada, so we didn't get any word from Prevost for a few months, so Eastchester Depot was quite busy during early 2025. XN40 673 was officially written off on January 25th, making it the first MTA XN40 to officially retire. NextGen's 4166, 4468, 4520, 4522, and 4626 out of Baisley were loaned to College Point. JFK received LFS Coneheads 9023, 9096, and 9098, which brought them up to 178 Coneheads and left them with one more unit to inherit. LaGuardia received LFS Coneheads 9226, 49-50, 52, 54-57, 9260, 62-64, and 9269 to 9271, which bumped their total from 62 to 77 units. That allowed them to send NextGen's 4571, 80, 87, 98, and 4601 to Stengel, and 4394, 4397, and 4541 to East New York. 4497 was retired, and 4490, 4495, 4508, and 4512 were sent to Eastchester Scrap, which reduced LaGuardia's NextGen total from 35 units to 21, listed here. Now regarding the ex-New Jersey Transit 2008 MCI D4500 CTs at the MTA, 2200 was sent from Spring Creek Storage to Zariga on October 11th, and 2199 was repainted into the MTA white and blue scheme on November 4th. 2199 to 2200 were assigned to Spring Creek on December 5th, becoming the first two ex-New Jersey Transit MCIs to be assigned and delivered to an MTA depot. 2199 was on its way to begin a trip on January 3rd, but it broke down in the Queens Midtown Tunnel, so its trip was aborted, which slightly delayed the NJT MCI's re-debut into service under the MTA. 2197, 2204, and 2206 were delivered to Spring Creek, joining 2199 to 2200, which had been there since December. By that point, Spring Creek now had 5 ex-New Jersey Transit MCI D4500 CTs, but none of them were in service. At College Point, the oldest 2004 D4500CL 3007 was retired on January 17th, with its last run having occurred in July 2024. It was also retired along with 3280. That left 7 2005 D4500CLs active in the system, 4 of which are 3000 series units, 3020, 3040, 3066, and 3082. Here were some express bus loans and transfers which took place. The winter pick took effect on January 5th, resulting in some extraordinary fleet changes. LFSAs 5444 to 5467 were given back to Quill for M60 select bus service after being at Mother Claire Hill throughout 2023 to 2024, when the route still belonged to them. Their racks were gradually removed. XE40 5003 became the first electric to run on the route since it was returned to Quill on February 11th, followed by XE60 4953 on February 19th. 10 LFSAs listed here were given to Mother Claire Hill for M125 service. These were the first units to be given. However, they now have 17 2012 LFSAs which are listed here, many of which came from Tuskegee. They were given to Hill for M125 service. The last Tuskegee LFSAs to run on the M125 were 5261, 5265, 5914, and 5918, which ended up at Hale later. The first XD60 to run on the M125 after the pick was 6220 on January 5th. The first XDE40 to run on the route was 9499 on January 9th. Meredith officially closed down on January 3rd, being dealt a blow just like the Air Nomads, which had caused the Sim 4X to go to Charleston, the Sim 15 to go to Yukon, and the Sim 3, Sim 30 to Sim 35 to go to Castleton as previously expected. As a result, various equipment was shifted out. Of course, the Meredith Prevost had to go, so 1557 to 1571 were given to Castleton, 1572 to 1586 were given to Charleston, and 1587 to 1606 were given to Yukon, along with all of the 2012 Prevosts. Meredith's last three 2015 to 16 Prevosts, 27, 51, 53, and 56, were moved to Castleton. We had a snowstorm on January 19th, which prompted several snow loans to be dispatched throughout the boroughs. 4691 was loaned to Hale, while 4693, 9417, and other XDE40s and LFS HEVs from Manhattanville, as well as all of West Farm's XD40s, were loaned to Gun Hill. Several JFK NextGens were loaned to Basie Park, while several LFS HEVs were loaned to Mother Claire Hill, while several XD40s were loaned from Fresh Pond to Quill. And here were some notable runs which took place within the month. Finally, on January 11th, the MTA announced a 265 XE40 order to retire the 2011 buses, that including the 3rd Gens, XD40s, and LFSs. An XHE40 demo also made its way to Gun Hill on January 16th, but I don't believe this is the official model. February 2025. West Farms received more LFS HEV loans, 9789, 9798, and 9834. The latter two ran on the BX-17 and BX-32 on February 11th. Kingsbridge received more occasional loans through February and March for rush hour trippers from Manhattanville, with a notable one being the at the time recently transferred 4359. Ironically, its first trip back in New York City Transit was on a Kingsbridge route rather than a Manhattanville one, running on February 26 on the BX-20. Here were the loans that Kingsbridge received throughout February and March. Manhattanville received 4359 from LaGuardia and retired 4672. Meanwhile, 4673 and 76 received partial repaints in late March, which usually indicates that they're going to stay for a little while longer. Sorry, 4673, they lied to you, but we'll get to that later. 9622 was given to Manhattanville, while 9865 went back to Tuskegee. XD40 7586 was sent to the depot for repairs, while 8671 had somehow ended up at the depot for storage the next month. It was like a brief callback to when the depot had XD40 7572 to 7591 in their possession during 2023. Michael J. Quill received more LFSA loans for trippers on their Select Bus articulated routes. Casey Stengel received 4350 and 4567 from LaGuardia and retired 4065 and 4686, which brought their total to 40 next gens. 4065 was briefly sent to West Farms for a pit stop, then sent to Zuriga. LFS's 8045 and 8705 were loaned to the depot on February 26th. At College Point, C40LF 221 got into an accident and was retired on March 29th. It marks the third 2011-13 C40LF to be retired, when we consider 642 as well. If you guys know about the other C40 that's retired, please let me know. East New York received NextGen's 4531, 4597, and 4599 from LaGuardia, while 4187 and 4201 were retired on February 12th, increasing their total to 12 units, their maximum total since July 2023. More Brooklyn Excelsior loans took place, listed here. In terms of XC40s, Michael J. Quill re-received Pilot Unit 4965 on February 3rd, re-debuted on February 10th on the M42, while Grand Avenue received XC40s 5007 and 5020 to 22. 2025 XC40 5030 debuted on February 13th on the B62. 5014 and 5016 were sent to Neber for repairs. Quill now had 21 XC40s, while Grand had 32. XC40s 4984-85 re-debuted out of Charleston Depot, joining 4981, which had entered service in January. 4985, which had entered service on October 21st on the M11, re-debuted on the S78 on February 4th, while 4984 re-debuted on February 11th on the S74. However, it didn't get Charleston stickers until June 18th. XC40s continued to take trips to East New York. Here was the XC40 distribution as of February. LFSE Plus Electric 5028 was spotted at Plattsburgh on February 5th. On February 13th, 2025 New Flyer XC60 6287 was confirmed to be built. XD60 6289 was delivered to Gun Hill Depot on February 19th, allowing us to get our first look at what the specs of the 2025 to 2027 New Flyer XD60s would have in store. Well, take a look for yourself. I am very disappointed that it don't have the streamlined long roof, but that's okay. It conducted some training around Pelham Bay on March 8th, and then was shifted from Gun Hill to Stingle on March 13th, racked up, and given Omni readers and a fare box. The bus trained around Flushing on March 24th and on other days. It entered service on April 17th on the Q44 Select Bus service, and tested on the Q12 and Q44 until July 21st. It broke down on June 15th and therefore took a brief trip to Zariga on June 17th. XD60 6290 to 6295 were confirmed to be built on April 24th. The assignments for this order were later released in March. Here were the assignments. Base order of 224 XD60s, 6287 to 6510. Stingle is slated to receive 46 units. Gun Hill, Kingsbridge, and West Farms are each slated to receive 45 units. West Farms getting new equipment again? Let's go! And Tuskegee is slated to receive 43 units. This seems like a well-balanced order. Basie Park sent Next Gen's 4122, 4166, and 4210 to Zariga in early February, purging all units below 4468. However, they got 3 4500 series Next Gens from LaGuardia. Their Next Gen total became 7 units. JFK received LFS Conehead 9099 on February 1st, completing their allotment of 179 LFS Coneheads once and for all. Their last few 9090 series entered service. 9101 was the last 9100 series unit to enter service, which did so on February 4th on the Q60. 9099 entered service on February 6th on the Q7 and Q60, meaning all of their Coneheads were now in service. They retired Next Gen 4680, which reduced their total to 13 Next Gens, listed here. At this point, they only had 2009 units left. 4680 was the only 2010 Next Gen JFK got from New York City Transit, as well as their very last 2010 unit in general. It outlasted all of the MTA bus units that JFK had between 4631 and 4655. Insane. LaGuardia received LFS Coneheads 9236, 41, 65, 66 to 68, which increased their count from 77 to 83 units, finishing their allotment once and for all, and marking the end of the combined 308 Nova LFS order for MTA bus, which was delivered between August 2023 and February 2025. A lot better than the Nova LFS HEV order, but not as superb as the 2019 LFS order. Nevertheless, it marked a rebound for an agency which would sadly be leaving the United States. The numerically highest Conehead, 9271, entered service on the Q49 on February 11th. 9266 was the second to last Conehead to be delivered, which arrived on February 20th and entered service on February 28th on the Q49. 9241 was the last Conehead to be delivered to LaGuardia, which was delivered on February 28th and entered service on the Q104 on March 11th. That was the last MTA bus LFS to enter service in general. They sent Next Gen 4359, a unit once thought to have been retired, to Manhattanville. They retired 4453, sent 4350 and 4567 to Stingle, sent 4500, 4502, and 4570 to Basie Park, and 4531, 97, and 99 to East New York. That left them with 11 Next Gens listed here. So basically, they used the Next Gens as a surplus fleet to bolster other MTA bus and New York City Transit depots, while retiring the units in worse condition. Zariga retired 4514 on January 17th, which left them with 10 Next Gen units for training, listed here. 2 units were at Eastchester for training. February was chock full of snowstorms. We had a snowstorm on February 2nd, which caused several units to be taken out of service due to getting stuck in the snow. On February 8th, several C40LFs and XD40s from West Farms and Kingsbridge LFSs were loaned to Gun Hill. 3 LFS HEVs, 9640, 9722, and 9885, were loaned to Hale. Many Fresh Pond XD40s were loaned to Flatbush. College Point XD40s, 9273 to 77, were loaned to Basie Park, along with LaGuardia Coneheads 9197, 9200 to 01, 9225, and 9232, marking the first time the 2023 XD40s got to run on Basie Park routes. It was only a matter of time. Next gens 4343, 4356, 60, 4416, and 4534 were also loaned from JFK to Basie Park. February 15th. Several Manhattanville Next Gens were dispatched to other depots to replace Arctics that would usually run because of the snow. 4675 went to Quill, running on the M55 for the day with the Michael J. Quill sticker. 4683 went to Tuskegee, while 4690 and 4694 went to Gun Hill. West Farm C40s and XD40s went to Gun Hill again. Several hybrids were dispatched from Manhattanville to Gun Hill, Kingsbridge, Hale, and Tuskegee. 9888 went to Gun Hill. 5 LFS HEVs went to Hale. XDE40s were dispatched to Gun Hill and Tuskegee. 9274 to 77 went back to Basie Park along with 2015 XD40s and Conehead 9211 from LaGuardia to serve on Basie routes once again. Mild snow took place on February 21st, which prompted some routes to use 40-footers, but nothing too intense. And last but not least, here were some notable runs which took place in February. And a D45 CRTLE demo was spotted roaming around Staten Island and Lower Brooklyn on February 14th. Exciting times. March 2025. We started having more Arctic runs on the BX26 and BX30 for Gun Hill. Quill continued to receive LFSA and other loans from Mabistoa depots. At this point, Mabistoa is just a giant fleet pool. Hale also got some loans on March 21st, 5341 and 5356. Tuskegee lost LFSA 5331, which was sent to Eastchester Scrap on March 20th, thanks to an accident in the early summer of 2024. LFSA 5258 was temporarily stored at Eastchester for a couple months, however it has since returned to service. That was only for storage. 5331, however, is retired. Casey Stengel at this point had 40 Next Gens. JFK sent Next Gen 4625 to Stengel, which brought their total down to 12 Next Gens, listed here, and Stengel's up to 41. East New York retired Next Gen 4200 after its last run on March 5th, dropping their total to 11 units. 4187 and 4200 to 01 were removed from New York City on June 2nd, marking an official end to the Next Gens which rekindled the era of Orions at East New York in July of 2023. The last few 2024 XE40s entered service. 4970 was the last 4900 series XE40 to enter service at Grant, doing so on March 11th on the B39. 5021 was the last 5000 series XE40 to enter service, doing so on March 28th on the B62. And I still haven't caught a 5000 yet. Crazy. Finally, the last XE40 to enter service was 4966 on March 17th on the M79 Select, which is ironically the first XE40 I've caught since this was a re-delivery. Here was the XE40 distribution at the time. Kingsbridge had 4 units, Grand had 32, Quill had 22, and Charleston had 3. All 60 units have been delivered, along with 5030. Okay, LFSE Plus Electric 5028 was spotted at Plattsburgh on February 5th. That marked our first official sighting of the LFSE Plus fleet and confirmed the fleet range as well. LFSE Plus 5025 was seen at the Nova plant. 5026 was delivered to Zariga on March 27th, but broke down on the way to Charleston. 5027 was delivered to Zariga on March 16th with chrome rims, then delivered to Quill either on March 27th or April 4th. On March 22nd, 4588 in Eastchester Next Gen was also sent to Eastchester Scrap. That left 3 Next Gens in Eastchester awaiting their fate. However, they were never going to enter service again. Zariga Next Gens 4122, 4166, and 4210, as well as 4686, a retired Stengel Next Gen, were sent to Eastchester Depot likely for training or parts. That left 6 Next Gens at Eastchester for training and 8 units at Zariga, listed here. Next gens 4165, 4262, 4482, 4514, and 4635 were removed from the scrap lot to Nassau County for disassembly on March 6th. 7548 was sent from Zariga to Gun Hill on March 21st, having been repaired from its accident, re-entering service on the BX25 on May 12th. This was the first time that the bus has been back in service since its accident on September 27, 2022. Prevost 1458, which got into an accident on January 17th where it nearly fell off a damn highway, was sent to Zariga on April 2nd for repairs. 1458 re-entered service on May 28th on the BX M1. Now, as for the 2008 D4500 CTs from New Jersey Transit, on March 26, 2196 and 2208-09 were sent from Eastchester Scrap Storage to Zariga, being repainted in the process. On March 4th, the first 3X New Jersey Transit CTs entered service out of Spring Creek, with the first one being 2199 on the BM3. 2197, 2199 to 2200, 2204, and 2206 all entered service between March 4th and March 10th. Meanwhile, out of Castleton, 2201 and 2205 entered service, with 2201 being the first to do so, entering service on March 6th on the SEM 30, triggering a very short-lived era of New Jersey Transit CTs at Castleton. Damn, this update was so delayed, I'm talking about a fleet which isn't even at Castleton anymore. And here were the notable runs for March 2025. The initial assignments for the Prevost XD60s and XE40s were announced. The Prevost list is now obsolete, but you can still take a look at it if you want to, because now we have the option order of 131 Prevost, which has been confirmed as of mid-July. For our XE40s, most of them are expected to go to Gun Hill and Queens Village, which is a shock for some. But if you've been paying attention to the stages planned out, I guess it's not too much of a shock. I am not including April and May in this video. The video is going to be too damn long. Next video,